and watching all the zombie movies in the world. The time is now. We got to get to work right now.
If you build it, they will come.
In the second wave, with the M19 initiative, with the face shields, we also did the same thing with oxygen concentrators.
Hello and welcome back to the Hello World podcast. I'm Carrie Anne, a computing content creator and digital maker.
And I'm James Robinson, a computing educator, also an enthusiastic maker who also loves solving problems. I'm working on projects promoting effective pedagogy within our subject, such as our recently published Big Book of Computing Pedagogy, which is available digitally for free at helloworld.cc/bigbook. Also, if you'd want to support our show, then please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a 5-star review.
James, last episode, we spoke with two educators who had built makerspaces into their schools and they brought making into their curriculum. We uncovered the how and the why, to some extent, around makerspaces in education. So today we're asking, can makerspaces change the world? No pressure. So as our pedagogy expert, why is it important to think about real world impact when teaching through making?
And I think, that's a very big question. But I think let's sort of try and break that down a little bit. I think, first of all, we know that real world impact is something that drives motivation for many learners. Lots of learners are motivated by seeing the real world impact of the things that they are making and learning about. So we know that. And in fact, that's one of the pedagogical principles that underpins a lot of the work we do here at the Foundation. We talk about making things concrete. So giving people tangible experiences that mean something to them in their context. So solving a problem in their local area with their community, not only benefits that community, but it also helps those learners see the impact of what they're learning. And I think particularly when we think about makerspaces, when we're making physical artifacts, we are making things concrete in the sense that we're bringing a subject in computing that's quite abstract. A lot of the things we create are digital and have no substance. And so actually we're bringing it into the physical realm. We're connecting, computing with materials and material science and creativity. And then the last thing that I would say that I think it's really not to be kind of underestimated is the fact that making builds so many more skills than the subject-specific skills you're learning through computing, for example. Our engineers, our scientists, our inventors and entrepreneurs of the future, they all need those skills of being able to develop an idea, to prototype it, to test it, to refine it, and also work collaboratively with others. And so I think makerspaces are a real fertile ground where our learners can develop a lot of those skills and see the impact of what they're learning. So that's kind of my big thoughts on that question.
So as usual, you have a lot to say on the subject.
Oh, I'm never quiet, Carrie. What are your thoughts? How do you see makerspaces having an impact on learners and the wider community?
Yeah, I think everything you said really resonates with me. I think making is more than just a tool for engaging young people, right? We talked a lot about in our last episode about how it can inspire young people and get them really excited about subjects like computer science and engineering and mathematics. But you touched on this. I think the thing that's more important to me is that all of our young people have a better understanding of the world around us and how that world works and how they can impact on the world through technology. And I think one of the hardest things for educators is not the motivation piece, right? You can set up a makerspace, you can engage in digital making with your young people. I think the harder part is the inspiration piece, is the world around us, it's the having the wider societal impact and being able to connect the two. So I think we're very, very fortunate today in that we have invited and so lucky to have joining us two guests who have firsthand experience of the impact, the positive impact that makerspaces can have on learners and on the wider community in Mumbai in India. So I'm very pleased to welcome Vaibhav Chhabra, who is a mechanical engineer, passionate carpenter and founder of Makers Asylum, a community space focused on fostering innovation through hands-on learning, providing education in areas of hardware, design and sustainability. So welcome. Where did your passion for making come from, and what led you to found Makers Asylum?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Been a follower and lover of Hello World and Raspberry Pis growing up. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm a mechanical engineer, but before a mechanical engineer, I grew up in India, and I used to spend most of my summers making things or doing something or the other. Well, I would rather say I used to be breaking stuff, trying to make things, but I didn't really know how to make them or put them back together. So, like, there were a bunch of times when I was growing up, I remember opening up cell phones and my PlayStation or my cycle, and I never knew how to put it back together properly. So that's when I really thought that I'm going to go into engineering school to try and figure that part out. And that got me to Boston. I started studying at Boston University and had the opportunity of being there with a lot of really, really cool people learning and making things. And that's around the time when this really, really cool makerspace called Artisans Asylum is also based out of Somerville that I used to spend a bunch of my time in. It was more like my second home. There was Danger Awesome, another makerspace in Cambridge. There was the Tinkering Lab inside Boston University. And then I also got the opportunity to start working with a startup at MIT Media Labs called iNetra, which had a makerspace inside it. So there were so many makerspaces everywhere, and there was so much action when it came to having access to tools. So I think I did have a want and passion towards making and breaking since childhood, but my real aspect of community and real aspect of what really the feeling of making is and why is it so much more, that came in when I was in Boston.
And can you tell us a bit more about the foundation of Makers Asylum, how that kind of came about sort of after all of that experience?
Right after, so while I was working for the startup in Boston called iNetra, we were making these mobile eye diagnostic devices, sort of like a virtual reality device, but to give you an eye test using a smartphone. And so they'd asked me to come back to India and to a new city called Mumbai, which I'd never been to before, at least growing up. And so I landed up over here straight from Boston and started working on prototyping this device and making it for the local community over here, because the device had more of an impact in India than it did in Boston, because it was like a portable eye diagnostic device that you could take around to villages and really make it sort of accessible for people here. And that was the thought, but it also came with its own challenges because a lot of the stuff that worked in Boston did not work over here. So we didn't have the same kind of sort of environment for the device. We didn't have the same kind of clean spaces. We didn't have the same kind of machining tools as well to be able to fix it. We didn't have the same kind of access to 3D printers, for example, to be able to print out another part and put it in. Every time the device would break down, I had to order out parts either from Boston or go to a service provider in India who would charge me a bomb and take like weeks and then just send me the final product. And it wasn't fun. Being a maker, being an engineer, I wanted to be part of the making process. I wanted it to be made in front of me so I can figure out where did it go wrong or how can I make it better next time. When you work with a service provider, you just get this final little beautiful thing in the mail.
I really relate to that as well. I think as a maker, I'm quite impatient. So having to wait for someone to kind of send me something I want to be making now.
Exactly. I want it to be happening in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Also joining us from Makers Asylum is managing partner Richa Srivastava, who drives strategic collaborations and partnerships for Makers Asylum. She believes that the future of learning is evolving and alternate spaces will be significant in customizing people's learning journeys. Richa, can you tell us a little bit more about the education programs that Makers Asylum run and how they came about?
Traditionally, when Makers Asylum started, like back in the day in about 2013, it was, I think, one of the first community makerspaces that was established in India. So it started very organically as a concept as well. And a lot of people really came to use the space. So it started out of 100 square feet garage space. Then it slowly moved into much larger spaces. But the idea was to sort of obviously share tools and bring the community together. But I think what happened over the years was that a lot of people started coming to the space to learn about these tools, because a lot of people did not know how to use a 3D printer. They did not know how to use a laser cutter. A lot of people also did not know how to use a carpentry shop, for example, so there was a lot of the interest sort of came about in learning about these things. So we started doing workshops, we started doing, smaller programs, and then we started realizing how important is this whole, cycle of sort of, talking about making, but also teaching and passing it on to other people. And that's when we started thinking a little bit deeper into how we could really work across board to teach people to how to integrate technology for creating impactful solutions, designing these programs which had the element of making core to it, but also relied a lot on these maker tools, so that somebody could go from ideation to actually making very quickly, sort of came about. So we've been doing various kinds of things. So from even like smaller workshops, like for example, the other day, this weekend, we were making a boat using a sheet metal and origami paper folds. So it's literally like a DIY boat that could actually go into the water. So they're like interesting things that sort of caught attention of a lot of people in India, and a lot of people started coming to this space. And then we sort of progressed into designing much larger programs as well, where we work on sustainability, for example, with now alumni in over 40 countries through our program SDG School, where we bring together interdisciplinary groups to work on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then we also work with teens, for example, now with our program Innovation School, to help them really understand applications of, various skills and then apply to something that they're passionate about.
And you talked there a lot about you kind of, if you build it, they will come. And it sounds like you had lots of different types of people come to your makerspace. One of the things I'm really interested in is intergenerational kind of skill sharing. So did you find that you had people who came to the makerspace who perhaps had some level of experience and wanted to share that with others? Or did you find that you were kind of teaching everybody of all different ages kind of these new skills?
I think I'll take that first and I'll pass it on to Vaibhav as well. But I think there's a lot that went in the beginning, the champions of the maker culture in India, I would say, because the space originally was designed for adults. I mean, we'd never thought about children when it, initially when it started. So I think the earlier part of when Makers Asylum was getting established and a lot of people were coming to the space, there was a lot of sharing of knowledge that was happening between the people that were coming in. So there were a lot of interdisciplinary kind of folks that were also there. Somebody was great with hardware, somebody was great with software, somebody was great with wood, somebody was a great artist. So it was a mix of various kinds of people that have come to the space over the years. So now I'm passing on of knowledge to each other and sort of collaborating on that level to really make things together, which are locally also relevant for, the problems around you as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there's a reason I decided over the years to have a role that's called Chief Learning Officer, because I'm always learning stuff, I think. And that's the best part of like being in a place like me. I'm super lucky to be there, is because there's so many people who come to the makerspace. I mean, they're doing such amazing projects. They're doing such amazing work. There are so many people who have retired who are coming to the makerspace as well. There are people coming as young as 13 years of age, but have super amount of knowledge about making. So it's super cool to be able to constantly keep learning from them. And I think since the beginning, that's been the case. Since day one of Makers Asylum, it never started as a place where we wanted to impart knowledge or teach. It was more like we were learning and we were sharing that knowledge with more people so that all of us could learn together and share that knowledge.
I love that the title that you have there, the Chief Learning Officer, and it's not only, it's sort of modeling learning as well. And I think that's really important. I'm really interested, reflecting on that. What are some of the things that over the past, couple of years, what have you learned from running Makers Asylum, either about learning itself or about your community or...
Well, I've learned a lot of different tools. That's, of course, one of the things that you do at a makerspace. So I've learned anything from programming drones to working with electronics and robotics. I've learned about welding. I've learned about carpentry. I've learned about design. I've learned about all sorts of stuff. What I've learned a lot about is how to work with people. And that's one more very, very important skill that I've picked up over the years, because all of a sudden now you have so many people from different backgrounds coming up. Everyone has their own agenda of some sort of the other. So how do you actually manage that aspect? Because at the end of the day, when you're running a place like Maker's Asylum or a makerspace, it's like running Disneyland, where people from all different parts of the place are coming in and expecting to see magic. What you're doing at the back end is trying to make that magic happen, but at the same time, you're managing a lot of different things. Allow that magic to happen, and also not allowing it to fall apart or burn down, or so many things that can go wrong. While you're also learning how to deal with people, you're also learning about how to manage an organization, how to organize a business and things like that, and how to keep it sustainable. And those are some of the things that I've learned over the years quite a bit. It's been quite exciting. I'm still learning how to run that. And it's great to have Richa by my side, because she has a lot more knowledge when it comes to running a business. So we're both able to somehow manage the chaos.
You've talked a lot about this being a real community space and people coming and going, and it feels very in person. I would imagine that the pandemic, the global pandemic, has probably had quite an impact on the way in which you run Makers Asylum and what you did. How did you respond to the pandemic? Did you do anything differently, or did you move towards providing PPE? Like, how did that change for you?
The first thing that you think about growing up and watching all the zombie movies in the world is like, the time is now. We got to get to work right now. I remember I was jumping up and down and I didn't want to go back home, and then passing it on to Richa.
Yeah, it was like the scene from the post-apocalyptic movies where there's nobody on the streets and the makers unite. That's exactly what happened. So I think what we did differently was we decided to not go back home and just stay over at the space so that we could use the tools and do something at that point. And I think one of the first thing that started happening, just like everywhere else in the world, now that we realized across the world different maker spaces did the same thing, I believe, that we also started helping out our local communities, our frontline workers, with things like face shields in the beginning. The exciting part of what happened in that time was that we were able to actually open source the designs, just like anybody else would do in the community, and activate over 42 cities, towns, and villages in India who had access to a laser cutting machine. And we were able to go from a 0 to 1 million face shields in 49 days, which was a very quick turnaround time for a small maker space, to do.
Well, she makes it sound simple. It wasn't like that. I mean, the entire city was on a lockdown, and right at the beginning, we were looking at what's happening out there, and there was news about how bad the PPE ecosystem was. There was hardly any PPE available in the country. And India was also, just like every other part of the world, importing from China, and China stopped sending stuff. So it was time that we started making in-house, and it was time that we started making quickly. And at a time like this, you can't think traditionally. Like most businesses, we're all trying to think about how they can create a mold and manufacture or design. While at a makerspace, we were going from rapid prototyping, we were trying out different designs. That's the time when we started looking around in the open source ecosystem, and we found out about the 3D printed face shields. And we said, oh, that's cool, but that's really slow. I mean, it's going to take 40 minutes to make one face shield. How do we make that faster? And we had access to a laser cutter. So we said, hey, you know what? Let's make designs which are laser cuttable. Back in the day, this is around the 23rd of March. There weren't any laser cut designs at that point. So we started sharing our designs back in the community, the global community, of open source medical supplies, our friends at Artisans Asylum and everywhere. We started sharing our laser cut designs. They were like, oh, this is cool. So we started going with these laser cut face shields to hospitals after that, but not really. We didn't go to the hospitals because we were scared to enter the hospital, but we went to the doctors' houses and showed them our designs and got feedback from them. We got a lot of feedback because just to give you an example, the first couple of designs we made were in MDF. And MDF happens to be a really, really bad material for an ICU or a hospital setting. I mean, it's completely porous. It's going to keep all sorts of bacteria inside it. That's when we moved to acrylic and we realized how brittle it is and how like not usable it is in a hospital environment as well. Because a doctor was wearing one of our face shields made out of acrylic and it just broke and flew off. We decided and we hit upon this very, very exciting material called sunboard or foam board. Now, foam board is a very interesting material because it's available commonly across India and across the world in every stationery shop because it's used a lot for marketing material. It happens to be waterproof and it happens to be laser cuttable. And super light and flexible as well. So it had all the key things that we required to be able to use it to make face shields very quickly using laser cutters. So what we did is we used all that knowledge. We started sharing it really quickly and started making these really crazy videos every night about announcing how many we have made in a day, which started to catch a lot of traction and other makerspaces started joining us. Very quickly, we went from 0 makerspaces to 42 makerspaces, went from making just a few hundred face shields spending day and night to making almost 100,000 face shields a day, reaching to 1 million shields in about 49 days. Precisely by creating this consortium.
What's really nice about that sort of the story and of how that kind of all came about. I mean, we can't connect back to what we started talking about at the beginning of the show about impact in the real world, and we talked about like speed of, as makers we're quite impatient, so we want things to move quickly, and so not relying on supply chains but being able to kind of solve those problems ourselves. And I think because you wrote about this in Hello World, but I think did I remember reading that you had individual children in like bedrooms or small locations dotted around India that were cutting their own face shields. So those young individuals, those learners, are seeing the impact of being part of that community. I think that's a really powerful story.
Thank you. Yes, the youngest member of the M19 collective was only 12 years old. He made 344 shields with his family. There were filmmakers and in Guwahati that were making face shields inside a university.
Yeah. No, their houses actually.
Their houses.
Yeah.
There was a university making face shields. There were small businesses making face shields. And it was crazy because the demand was so high. We literally, I remember when we were in Bombay. Now, Bombay or Mumbai is completely filled with, it's a packed city. It's like Manhattan. And the population is really, really high. And it was completely dead. And we had ambulances and police personnel parked outside of Makers Asylum, like in their cars, waiting to pick up face shields from our space. Like literally, we had a line of police personnel, ambulances. They would take it in ambulances and transport it for us because that's the only vehicle that was allowed on the street, which is intense. I mean, we were living through all of those times and seeing this happen. So it was obvious that at a time like this, there was no way to sort of make in one place and ship. You had to make locally for the local ecosystem. And what better way to do that than digital manufacturing in makerspaces?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, you've mentioned open source there, I think, which, put a big smile on Carrie Anne and myself's face. I think we're big advocates of all things open source. And so it's really nice to kind of hear how that sort of helped help drive the project. I think that's really interesting.
And one of the things you described so nicely is the thing that sometimes I think educators we struggle with, which is this rapid kind of prototyping and testing cycle. We teach young people when we're teaching them technology that, you come up with your idea and you sort of create a little bit and then you test it and then you iterate and you kind of go on this cycle. And sometimes young people can't understand why. And I think what you've just described is exactly how these skills, these prototyping, these design skills, the testing aspect, which you talked about, just constant testing, how that can take you from kind of zero to hero, right? Get you from A to B really quickly and really well.
Yeah. Imagine working with a service provider and waiting for your shipment to come in. Won't work. You had to get access to those tools, right?
Yeah. And are these then the skills that you're teaching kind of young people through the programs that you run, like the innovation program?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we are focusing exactly on whatever we've learned from the process of, making with the M19 initiative with the face shields. We also did the same thing with oxygen concentrators in the second wave, which was around sort of, again, using distributed manufacturing and open sourcing designs. And we actually made an oxygen concentrator in about 6 weeks. And we had 4 iterations of it, which is a fairly complex device versus a face shield. And there were over 150 organizations who were part of that open research brainstorming, because everything was happening in an open fashion. So I think what we really have been focusing on is to take this real world knowledge that we gain on a daily basis through various projects and people and the community that we meet, to actually translate that into something that we pass it on to the younger generation, because they're going to be the ones who are going to be holding fort in the future to solve for these problems. And the most important piece over there is to sort of build that mindset around making, and to look at problems with empathy, and really not just make, but make with some kind of purpose and passion.
So I really like how there's that sort of that proximity between the development and innovation that's going on with one part of the makerspace and the learning on the other, and how you're able to bring that learning from one space to the other really rapidly and model that learning process. So Vaibhav, for you, has that been a deliberate sort of philosophy or strategic thing, kind of bring those two aspects of making and learning together? What's your take on that?
Deliberate, I'm not sure, but it has been a very organic way of dealing with things, because being a maker and being somebody who likes to constantly be working on projects, we are constantly working on different projects. So we're able to learn a lot from there to be able to bring it into our education world and pass that knowledge on. So again, passing on and sharing the knowledge in a community way. But what I also feel that is that unless you actually make something, you feel unqualified to make that. And to be able to only get that feeling out, you need to get started in making something. And that's something that we've learned. And I've personally really, it's helped me, because when I started to make stuff, it made me more confident to be able to make so many more things. Students and young talents who are coming to makerspaces, they're able to start with simple projects, even if it's taking an open source design and 3D printing it, even if it's as simple as that. They're building confidence, the fact that they can do it, they can use that machine, and they can make this happen. And I think that is very powerful for me.
Thank you. It's a really powerful reflection. Thank you.
If you have a question for us or a comment about our discussion today, then you can email via podcast@helloworld.cc, or you can tweet us at helloworld_edu. My thanks to Vaibhav and Richa from Makers Asylum for sharing their expertise and experience with us today. This has been just such an inspiring conversation. You can read more about their work in issue 17 of Hello World magazine. So James, what did we learn today?
Well, for me, I think this really reinforced the power of real world problems in motivating learners. And I think if I was an educator in a classroom, I would be finding my nearest makerspace or starting my own, and also looking into the community to find the real world problems and challenges that might engage my students. How about you?
What I've learned is, come the zombie apocalypse, makers of the world unite!